Is this thing on?
Hello, everyone. My name is Lewis Harris, and I'm the creator of Record in Progress, the podcast that I created in the wake of the 2024 election cycle, where I was a voter who was surprised at the outcome of the election. And I believed that I could do more to affect the election in the way I wanted to see it go. And so I created this podcast to part address that. So that the Record in Progress podcast, the purpose is to share different perspectives, stories, and narratives to create understanding and a pathway towards a unified society. And so I'm privileged to have a virtual friend, someone who we definitely know a lot of the same people and roll in the same democratic circles here in Washington. And so I'm going to have you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Joanne.
Awesome. And how do you identify yourself, Joanne?
I identify as she, her.
Okay, awesome. And just to
And
kind of,
if you want more than that, I got to thinking after you asked me that question before, I was like, there's so many different ways to answer that, but I'm going to go with gender.
well, and it's interesting you say that because part of just I have a belief about evolution in society. And we, over the last 10 to 15 years, have been equipped with new terminology and language to address things like gender fluidity and, gender expression, as well as other things like institutional racism and lots of different new things that I'm sure you're aware of. And so I,
Yes.
I do ask that question broadly because I'm not trying to have any prescribed way of identifying yourself. So if you do have other kind of facets of your identity that you'd like to share for the viewers, I think it'd be helpful for people to know who you are and how what you say kind of connects with them.
I mean, given that this is a political podcast and the topics are political, I grew up in Washington State. I always joke I'm bi-Washingtonian because I lived half my life in Eastern Washington and half my life in Western Washington. And I didn't know, and this is lack of civics education, I guess. Also lack of involvement until 2015. I didn't know that in a lot of most states you have to register with a political party. We don't do that in Washington State. I was considered myself an independent because we didn't we weren't forced to choose. And I think that's absolutely the right way to go. The parties hate it because then they don't have data, they can't track
Mhm.
us. And I still maintain that is a better way to be more inclusive. I'm sure that a lot of my local party folks would disagree with me, but I came into things on the Bernie Sanders wave in 2015, 2016. And while a lot has changed, that basic core identity of myself has not. And I was a state committee member for the third legislative district for 5+ years and a PCO for an equal amount of time and for the Democratic Party here in Spokane. And it took me years to say, I'm a Democrat. And I still struggle because I don't think that we should identify ourselves by our political parties. And I'm sure we'll talk about this more later. I do believe that's a large part of why our country is so divided right now.
Sister, let's say that and let's talk about that because uh, you mentioned that you came into the quote unquote Democratic Party during the Bernie Hillary kind of fracture. And
Yes.
when I say fracture, you know exactly what I'm talking about
Oh, yeah. I
because,
worked for the Sanders campaign in 2016 at the DNC. I drove Nina Turner around for 4 days.
wow.
Yeah. So I was very involved in watching the sausage be made and being part of the sausage being made. And I've already spilled that tea. It's been a long time. It's still traumatic to think and talk about
Yeah.
because, yeah, it was hard. And the Democratic Party has not learned one thing since then.
So I know we're on the like barely the second question, but let's
All right.
unpack this because you're right. Like I mean, people who are in democratic politics, whether by assimilation or conformity, right? You're conforming and you're assimilating to a system to allow for your views to be really even just heard, right?
Right.
And the system and really the establishment has this almost weird way of doing things where it's like, yeah, we want you to be a part, we want you to donate, we want you to give your time and your energy and stuff. But when we're getting criticized about things that new people to the party are criticizing them about, or folks like Bernie, who just is a hardline, undoing institutional inequalities type
Yeah.
person, like that system tends to shut those
Come on
people
in, you're
down.
welcome, but only if you're willing to do it our way.
Say that.
And the problem is, it's been proven over the last decade plus, almost 2 decades, that our way, more often than not, does not work. When we say our way, the establishment Democratic Party does not work. We keep losing.
Yeah.
And yes, we have incremental victories. I firmly believe had Trump not screwed up the pandemic so bad, he'd have had a second term. Joe
Mm,
Biden was the weakest candidate on the slate. And of course, he was coronated because that's how they decided to do it. They learned their lesson in 2016 by not getting a handle on things quick enough. And Bernie got screwed twice. I was a
yep.
national delegate for him in 2020. And I don't care what anybody says, it's just true. And it was true in 2020, I think, even in 2016. But it's not about him. It's about, and it's not. And he, as we all know, is not me. It's that whole thing. Firmly believe that. But the problem is that the establishment does not want to change. They want to stick with the status quo and believe that, no, this time it's going to work. And because we get incremental victories like a Joe Biden win, they don't, they've convinced themselves that they have the formula or whatever it is. But we don't, because we just lost to Trump, who's a convicted freaking felon. And he won the popular vote, taking nothing away from Kamala Harris, because I think she ran the best campaign she could have.
Hmm.
She was probably the second least popular candidate in 2020. And I have a friend who's a Republican. She voted for Clinton twice.
Hmm.
And she voted for Trump in 2016 and 2020. I asked her, I said, are you going to vote for him again? And she said, no, I can't. I said, well, who would you vote for on our giant clown car of Democratic tickets, right? Or Democratic candidates? And she said, well, give me somebody to vote for. And so I went through the list, and the instant no's were the establishment candidates, the Joe Biden, the Kamala Harris. I said, would you vote for Pete Buttigieg? She said, probably. Would you vote for Bernie Sanders? And she said, yes. We're looking at, although Pete has gone way to the center, this was like fall of 2019 when we were having this conversation, and Pete was kind of the new shiny toy. He's changed a lot. Not that he's become much more establishment, which, whatever, it's his career. He chose to do that. It's fine. But I think it's interesting when we're talking to Republicans who have voted for Democrats in the past at the presidential level specifically. When we look at the people they're willing to vote for, they vote for the disruptors, they vote for the outsiders, they vote for the people that are not establishment Democrats. Unfortunately, the Democratic Party seems to hate the disruptors and the outsiders more than they hate losing, because instead of taking a note from it, they double down on what they've done in the past. Sorry, I know I could talk about this forever, so we probably
Yeah.
shouldn't. Feel free to send me off in another direction.
No, we're gonna get there, but I'm glad you opened it with this because I don't know if folks who are not involved in the political scene understand the sacrifice that many people, yourself, I would even say myself in as well, have had to do to fit in and to be able to contribute to values that we hold dear in this country, or things that we want to see change in our system. And
Right.
like many of us have had to assimilate to and to essentially just go along with what the people at on top who are producing the messaging and the political strategies, what they're saying to do, right? And
Right.
like, I mean, one of the things that I'm hypercritical of in with the Democratic Party, the establishment party, and this election cycle is like, y'all knew Joe Biden couldn't stand on stage and be having a conversation with people who are younger than him. Like why did it take so long for the people around him and the Democratic establishment to, I mean, they didn't proactively do anything. It was only
No,
after the debate that they were like, uh-oh, like
right.
we have to switch gears. And it's like, how dare you do that to people who I'm pissed. I'm
I'm
pissed.
pissed
Okay.
too. I'm still mad at Barack Obama for not, and it goes back to this, the Democrats are feckless cowards
Yeah.
because every opportunity, we had a supermajority at one point during
Hmm.
the Obama administration. Instead of turning the engines to high and putting our foot, mixing a metaphor, putting our pedal to the metal and just we got some stuff done. But Merrick Garland should be on the Supreme Court. Obama should have just said, nope, I'm putting him in. But time and time again, we don't do it because, oh no, we got to play nice with the other side. They never play nice with us. Why would we play nice with them? I'm
Sis,
sorry, it doesn't work. When Mitch McConnell publicly says our only goal is to block Barack Obama, he said it. Why do you not
right,
believe him and
right.
then act accordingly? And from a marketing perspective, Republicans are just better at it than we are. I do marketing for a
Yeah,
living. And I sit back and go, yeah, we suck. They rule. Because they do. They're really good at it. And they're really good at speaking to the masses. And we tend to, I don't hate the term identity politics. And I'm a queer woman. My daughter's transgender, as is her partner. And I absolutely believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion and all of those things. But when we choose to make those the mountains and the hills that we choose to die on, we lose so many people that aren't in the midst of it every single day. I After George Floyd, I used to work for a company in the Twin Cities, and after George Floyd, we had a big DEI initiative and watched this great video that Best Buy put together, and then had little mini talking groups afterwards. And I was leading one of the groups, and one of the people in it said, I didn't think race was a problem anymore in America. And my head about exploded. And then I had to take a step back and go, okay, I am really involved in politics, right? So I pay attention. The
right,
majority of Americans don't. And so they don't see what we see. They aren't mired in it every day, right? And when you live in a little liberal bubble or a little conservative bubble or whatever it is, you don't see outside of that. But most people don't live in that bubble. They just live
right.
and they kind of pay attention, maybe, or they don't.
Mhm.
So unless we are talking to the everyday person who doesn't really care or understand about that stuff, we're going to continue losing. It's just true.
Yeah, and the identity politics, I mean, just partly to round out your point is the economy touches everybody because everybody has to
Yes.
pay their bills, that they have to put food on the table, they have to put a roof over their house, yeah, over their
Yeah,
head.
for sure.
And so to have a presidential platform not be abundantly clear about the economy and like that should have been the talking points. Like you're right. Like one, we were too nice. Two, we were too naive. And three, we lost. So
Hey,
it's
we
like,
lost, so why are we not changing things drastically?
right. And gosh, okay. I'm gonna go to the
I
next
know I
question.
totally derailed your questions.
No,
I
no, no, you
apologize.
didn't. No, like that's the point of this podcast is we have a structure, we have structured questions to help us move through the conversations. But what I want people to hear is the reality of my guests and the reality of my point of view, and just understand that there are different views and hopefully see that there is a pathway forward because we're all people at the end of the day,
Right.
and we all have things that make us similar and different, and it's up to us and our future to figure out how to make the world work for everybody. So no, thank you for opening it because like that's real. So
Yeah, for sure.
so Joanne, the next question is what state and city do you live in?
I live in Spokane, Washington.
Okay, and what do you do?
My title is Senior SEO Strategist and basically internet marketing in the legal industry, and I've done it for over 16 years.
Excellent. Okay, maybe you and I need to talk about how to get the podcast on those. No, but
I'm happy to help if you'd like.
thank you, Joanne. Marketing is extremely important. I am trying to reach a broader audience because I felt that for me to be so surprised, and I take responsibility for my own experience and reactions, for me to be so surprised, even though there were signs like like I don't understand something about other people that created the surprise that I had after the election. And so let's just understand each other. So Joanne, this next question you might have already answered, but the question is what is a credential that you use most often to sell yourself on job applications?
Honestly, it's one of those questions that I hate answering because I don't even know. I think I'm just authentically me and I'm very straightforward. I say what I think. I try to say it in the kindest, most politically correct way possible, as often as possible. People, if there's anyone who knows me and is listening to this, they're going to be laughing their butts off right now because they know me and know that's a funny statement.
Uh,
Because I tend to be one of those people you either love or you hate. But no, I am authentically me. And I genuinely believe you were talking about, I think that we have far more in common than we do not. And I think we should all treat each other with kindness, dignity, and respect. And I think that's a credential. And it's a skill I think that people need to learn. And it's something that if we all offered each other, whether it's on a job application or in an interview or just day-to-day life, I think we'd all be a lot better off.
and gosh, it's interesting you said that because on one of the perspectives about the people who voted for Trump was that they allowed their ethics and morality to go out the window for what Trump was selling. And while that is a criticism and a perspective that some people have, we can't totally blame these people because one, we're not talking about issues that matter to them. And
Right.
I hate saying we now because
Well, I get what
I
you're saying though when you say we, because how else are we going to speak to it?
that's right. That's
It's
right.
either they or it's us and we. And
Right.
I prefer to be a part of the we.
Right. I appreciate your perspective, and I again am privileged to have you on the podcast. And so the next question I have, which is the meat of this conversation, is how did you vote in the 2024 presidential election?
This is really hard for me to say out loud because I'm a Bernie Sanders person. I always will be. I voted for Kamala. I had to. And the biggest part of the reason why is playing itself out in Congress right now. Not in Congress, but on Capitol Hill, where we've got some insane right wing, mega hat wearing woman trying to keep a transgender person from going to the freaking bathroom.
Right.
Come on, people. My daughter, like I said, she's transgender. So is her partner. I have tons of friends who are also transgender, and I
Mhm.
am genuinely concerned for their lives. And there are so many people who voted for Donald Trump who either don't believe that he means what he says, and that's BS because watch him. He tries to follow through on everything that he says. He is a giant liar, and we all know it. But
Mhm.
when he says, I'm going to do this, he's going to try and do it.
Mhm.
And it was on his website. He wants to make male, female the only two genders legally allowed in the United States. That's a
Mhm.
terrifying prospect. And there are so many other things that I respect and admire. My friends who were Jill Stein supporters, I have many of them. I just couldn't take the chance. Washington's always blue.
Mhm.
Washington's blue because of King County,
Mhm.
period. If you
Mhm.
look at the maps, it's just true. In 2020, there was a little, the city of Spokane's usually pretty blue. And then there was this weird blue anomaly down around WSU. But when I
Mhm.
thought about it, I know that the Sanders campaign, we did a ton of outreach and a ton of voter registration at WSU and
Mhm.
down in the Tri Cities area for college students. And I'm wondering if that's, I haven't seen maps for this time around yet, but I'm wondering if that will hold this election cycle because I don't know what the party did or if they even did anything, if they did any voter registration drives, if they did any outreach. Our ground game has been weak. And I know I'm making this answer really long, but it was hard for me to vote for her. And there's a lot of reasons I didn't want to. And I probably could have gotten away with not voting for her because, again, King County carries the federal. It just does. It's where the mass of the population is in Washington state. And I wrote in Bernie Sanders in 2016 because I
Mm.
had that privilege in Washington state. And I've said it a million times. If I had lived in Ohio or Wisconsin or somewhere that was a swing state, I'd have put on my hazmat suit and I'd have voted for Hillary Clinton. I hate saying it, but there are literal lives at stake this time around. And I feel like the Democratic Party, they hate us more than they hate losing. Anyway, I voted for Kamala and it was hard for me to do, but I felt like I had to.
When
Yeah.
you say the Democratic Party hates us, are you talking about specifically like you? Are you talking about like
No,
rural
and no, I'm talking
Americans? Are you
about
talking about transgender Americans? Like,
no, not individual people or personas or
okay.
identities. They, when I say us, it's people who want actual change.
Mm,
The Call it the Bernie Sanders wing if you want, but that the Bernie Sanders, we've broken up into several different groups also. I
mhm.
know a lot of folks in 2016 who were Sanders supporters that voted for Trump. And how do you wrap your head around that? I'm like, how do you reconcile that dichotomy? Because Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump are polar opposites, but they're both disruptors.
Say that. That's it,
And
right?
that's what it is.
And
We want change. America wants change. And the Democratic Party's, nope, we're just going to keep on marching to the same drum. And America said, well, screw you.
right. Well, and you said something earlier about how Washington, we have the privilege of not having to identify which party we vote for
Yep.
and then having more,
Currently,
right. And that's interesting because I know a lot of people who, and like you mentioned, people who voted for Bernie Sanders, who voted for Trump this time. The point of that is that there is a lot of people in America who don't feel comfortable aligning completely with one party or the other.
right.
And so it's like, what is the candidate? What are they going to do to change things? Right. And how is that going to affect me? Those are the three things that those people in the middle who don't care if it's Republican or Democrat that they vote for, what they really think about. And
Yeah.
so, and that might be a exclusive list and there might be more factors, but it's kind of baffling because like the establishment sees these evidence of this time and time again, but chooses to continue to do the status quo.
Right.
And
And it's mostly about money. Citizens United made it so much worse. I've had people, well, who do you think I should vote for? And my answer in every instance is you need to vote for the candidate that best meets your needs. Do
yeah,
their policies and positions best meet your needs? If so, that's who you should vote for. It doesn't matter if it's who I would vote for. We
right.
each individually get to decide which candidate that is. But then we've got this wide pool that really kind of gets narrowed down, not without our input. And then we're forced into essentially a two-person race. I wish that we had more parties that were viable. We don't. It's been people at different parties have been trying to wheel their way in for decades, but right now it is a two-party system. But if you're not, we are for many other states again are forced to choose. We don't have to
Mm,
choose. And yes, you have to in the presidential primary where you have to say, I identify as a Democrat or I identify as a Republican or whatever that is. That was
right.
forced on there by the parties, if I
Right.
remember correctly. I'm a big fan of the caucuses. I know people hate them because they're chaotic, but that's also how you get people excited. And when you have, it's the reason Barack Obama won.
Mm,
I still maintain Bernie Sanders would have won in 2016. I was not surprised when Donald Trump won. People are like, oh, I can't believe he won. I'm like, I'm not.
right.
She was not the right candidate at the right time. I'm sorry, Hillary Clinton. She have a very impressive resume, but not the right candidate at the right time. Joe Biden, dude, how much more power do you need to have or maintain? How much longer do you need to say, I was president?
Right.
Come on, man, to quote himself. Come
Well,
on, Joe.
yeah. Well, I mean, the point of we're forced into a two choices because of viability, and there's people. I mean, the establishment class, the establishment people. like that's what they live on. They live on like I'm owed this role. And then
Yeah. Oh
we
yeah,
walked up in
totally.
2016 was I am I own this role. Like I
Right.
deserve this almost. And
Yeah.
it's like to the everyday person, it's like you don't, because you're still not saying anything that's actually going to benefit me. You know what
Right.
I mean? You're just
Yeah.
well saying what you think I want to hear, right?
Right.
Man,
Yes.
Joe, and I thank you for mentioning all of this stuff because it's good. It's real. So let's go on to the next question. What are three feelings you have about the results of the 2024 presidential election?